You're listening to The Mo Kelly Show. For all you comical
It's the Black Panther Nerdcast number 11. I'm Mo Kelly. I'll be your host and moderator today. Just in case you don't know me, I'm host of the award-winning Mo Kelly Show on KFI AM 640 and iHeartRadio. You may know me as a political commentator, social and cultural commentator for BBC Radio, CNN, CNN International, Fox 11, and also HLN. But I am joined by a cast of not only characters, but aficionados in their various fields. And let me just get to them right now. First joining me is Thomas Cunningham. You may be familiar with him in previous Nerdcasts, but let me have him introduce himself to you right now.
Hello, everybody. I am Tom Cunningham, owner of a 15,000 issue comic book collection. I am a screenwriter. I am an event producer. I am a blogger at tomistalking.blogspot.com. And I've been working with the Nerdcast team since we started this brand new adventure. And I am more than excited about this topic we're going to cover today. Wakanda Forever.
Samantha Grandberry joining us for the first time today, who's going to give a very different perspective, I suspect, than all this testosterone in the room, but also has a lot of connections to the community. And I know this movie has resonated on a lot of levels with different people. Samantha, introduce yourself.
I am so ready and so excited to be here in the studio. By profession, I am the Vice President of International Media and Marketing for a global billion-dollar nonprofit, the AIDS Healthcare Foundation, and also recently named the Executive Director of a new nonprofit, the Healthy Housing Foundation. And by night, I'm a 100% sister girl, just excited about Wakanda.
Tawala Sharp also joins us. He's the executive producer of The Mo Kelly Show, and this is his brainchild. This has been, I'll say, the product of his not only imagination, but vision. And so, Tawala Sharp, tell him what you know.
My comic book collecting goes back to 83 with Punisher versus Wolverine. That started me on my adventure into comics. Being a nerd in the hood was tough because you were oftentimes picked on. Fast forward getting into radio. I've been a music director, program director, on-air personality, promotions, production, street team, worked for Community Action for a minute for a legendary Los Angeles radio station, 92.3 turned 100.3 the beat, turned, what was it?
D100.
D100. Girl, we did it all. And I am the child of two extreme revolutionaries. My father was the founder of the Chicago chapter of SNCC. He went on many a freedom ride. He was security for Stokely Carmichael. My mother was a very, very vocal and involved member of the US organization, which led them both in Africa, where I was born in Bagamoyo, Tanzania, growing up in a community where everyone was Baba and Mama and everyone had African names, never seeing anything like this before in my going on 45 years. I am here because we are Wakanda.
That's a great starting point. From comic books to superhero movies and tech gizmos.
Chewie, is that you?
It's time for another installment of Nerdorama with Tawala.
I got a bad feeling about this.
Nerds.
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 Nerds! What is a nerd?
To infinity and beyond!
Let's talk about the opening thoughts of just the movie itself. I know what I expected going in. It exceeded my expectations, and I try to compartmentalize this. There is the social and political commentator part of me which watched the movie. There's the film critic part of me which watched the movie. And I have to sort of divorce those things, because when I saw this movie, I was trying not to get emotionally wrapped up in it and not look at it as an African and American man. I tried. That was impossible because it spoke to me on so many levels. It precluded me from making that separation. And to be fair, I don't think this was a perfect movie in a technical sense. I can make some small quibbles with some of the CGI and some of the pacing. But as an African-American man, there has never been a movie which spoke to me on so many levels and so deeply and touched my essence as a person here in America, depicting people who look like me and originated from a place like me in a way which had never been done before. So any type of minor criticisms that I may have for the technical aspect of the film far outweighed by the cultural and the consequential significance of the meaning of what was depicted on that screen. Thomas Cunningham, what say you?
I agree on all points, just because one of the things that we do, not only as nerdcasters, but as critique people, is look at the minor points. But to me, just as you can critique almost anything about any other movie, from the opening sequence where they incorporated the idea of the sand being an integral part of the technology of Wakanda, and that carried into the movie where all of their communication devices still use that kind of crystalline sand motif to render the 3D of the people, going into the closing credits where they reactivated that again. Every part of it worked for me. And people talked about the runtime, and one of the things that occurred to me is that I'd be happy to sit and live in this world for longer. It wasn't a rush for me where it was like, you watch some movies and you're like, okay, this part of that movie by the DC universe didn't need to exist at all. I really could have just had that sliced out and just get me through it faster. But even though there were bits that were long, there was nothing wasted in that length.
All of it was necessary.
All of it was necessary. And if you think maybe it wasn't necessary, then you weren't appreciating that Coogler and his crew were putting lots of layers into things. So you might have thought, did we have to go back to Oakland so many times? Well, yeah. Because every time you went, you saw something different, and it moved the story forward. And that is not always true. And one of the things that I think about this movie that is absolutely true is that it works on so many levels that it's hard to imagine that a major United States corporation would have attached a $200 million plus budget for some of the radical ideas that are in this movie. Because
there were a bunch of them.
It's not tame. And I know that there were lots of photeps out there talking about, this is a blankety blank movie and this isn't a black movie and
You need to define what a photep is.
Okay. I'm not going there. The term used to be Hotep, but Hotep is a shortening of Imhotep. So it's kind of a diss against Imhotep to call them Hoteps, because they're not really Hoteps, but they are amplifying their version of what they consider to be authentic blackness. So I call them photeps, from the French faux, F-A-U-X, and then tep, in honor of the progenitor for whom they aspire to be.
Samantha Grandberry, let me get you in here as far as your just the broad sense of the movie for you, top lining it.
Top lining it, first and foremost, in praise of the ancestors, I start with the words of Octavia Butler, the first African-American science fiction author in this world, who said, "What we don't see, we assume we can't be. What a destructive assumption." For me.
You're going to start preaching up in here already. Come on now.
Come on, Octavia.
Come on.
Come through, Octavia Butler.
And the church said, wow.
Talking Butler.
So for me, that is absolutely the personal, because if you see it, you can achieve it. The professional in me looks at things like in 2015 at the power of media for social impact that stated, the revolution begins in the imagination and liberation begins in the mind. So whatever the runtime was,
it wasn't long enough.
It was worth it, right? Clearly.
It was a long time coming.
Mm-hmm.
And so for me, I was so ready to see what I envisioned as the beauty of a people gracing the biggest screens in a way that no one has ever seen through the mind of such a young 31-year-old director who brought together a brilliant, diverse cast of people to bring to life a beloved comic book. And so I was ready. My body, my mind, my spirit, my soul, we were ready and we were fulfilled.
Yeah, we were.
Amen. Man, for me, Black Panther is a dream come true in that going back to be it Blank Man, Shaq's attempts at bringing steel to the screen, Blade, which I loved, Wesley Snipes, who originally wanted to do Black Panther and struggled to get that done, through Meteor Man, which did have an all-black cast centered around an African-American hero in the hood.
And Luther Vandross as an antagonist.
Which was killer. That was
one.
I gotta really look at Luther different after that.
That's an underappreciated role.
Oh no,
for Luther.
For Luther, yeah. You go back and watch that, you're like, dang, Luther.
I'm about to.
You brought that.
I'm about to go back and watch that.
You have to.
Is it fair then to say that Black Panther stands on the shoulders of those movies?
And that is exactly where I'm going. It's the realization that time and time we've tried to bring this to the forefront and it's been poo-pooed as, there's no audience for it, or no, it's not believable, or it's just we can't do it. And Disney said, no. Disney, right? Please understand that. Disney said, hey, Coogler, here's all the money you need to bring this vision to fruition without us hindering you one bit. I have dreamed a dream and it has come true. When I saw that movie, now going on my 5th time, my 6th time will be tonight. Each time that film brings out different emotions.
I don't know if you thought of this, but for me, it was not lost on me the complex relationship that Disney has had with the African American community over many years. And I think that added to my enjoyment because this is Disney doing it.
Yes.
It wasn't like Oprah got together with Tyler Perry and decided to cobble together enough money. No, Disney said that we believe in this project, we believe in this director, and we believe there is an audience for this specifically. And I don't want this to be lost on other people. I think that was on many people's minds as far as who helped make this happen and to what degree. And that brings me to my next point as far as there was a lot of hype, and hype can be positive or negative depending on the final product. There was a lot of hype preceding this movie. For me, I don't know if scared is the right word. I was in the midst of cautious optimism because I did not want to be so disappointed because I knew if we use history as a guide, so much was at stake. And I'll make this comparison to Barack Obama being the first African-American president. We wanted him to do well. But if he did not do well, we knew that it might be another 400 years.
Right.
Because America gave him the keys to the kingdom. Bring it all together. Disney gave Ryan Coogler the keys to the kingdom, pun intended, Wakanda and Disney. There's a lot of hype, which means higher expectations, the higher propensity for disappointment. Rarely were my expectations and also appreciation were they met on the same level. This movie did it for me.
I have to say, whatever initial concerns I had, when you checked off Ryan Coogler, I was like, okay, that's the first big one. They were talking about Ava DuVernay, and as much as I appreciate the work that she does, I was not sure she'd be able to tackle this material in the way that a superhero movie needs to be tackled. She could certainly handle the social aspects of it, but as far as the action and everything else, I was like, but then they brought in Coogler. And I'm like, okay, so we've seen Fruitvale Station, so we know the social is there. We've seen Creed, so we know that the fighting and the bigger
Action
budget
sequences
is there. And when I saw the first trailer, I mean, literally, when I saw the first trailer and they cued the light glints going up and down the Black Panther logo to the bass music hitting in the background, I said, "Oh, I'm good."
What did that mean to you?
It meant to me from top to bottom that somebody Black was looking at every single piece of this project.
Why does that matter?
It matters for a number of reasons, not the least of which is the emergence of the importance of Black people in media today. When I was growing up, when you were growing up, we didn't have an Oprah. We didn't have a Tyler Perry who owned his own studios. We didn't have Spike Lee yet, who had created so many things. We didn't have Malcolm Lee. We didn't have Will Packer. We did not have these people who were actually in positions of control. So everything that was fed to us was coming through a white lens. And to know and to sense and to believe that every single aspect of this movie was being looked at by people who looked like me and were concerned about the Black people who looked like me were going to be thinking about every move that they made, inspired a high degree of confidence in me. And of course, like every other person who has seen this movie, I have not been let down at all. I think getting this particular group together with this budget, and due respect to Wesley, if Wesley had done it 20 years ago and off the high of Blade, it would not be this.
Yes, true.
And it took Boseman being the star that he is, being young enough to be able to invest in for multiple pictures. It took Lupita coming out of nowhere to become this incandescent and amazing actress, winning her Oscar.
You talking about all the things which led up to the moment.
All the things that were put together in exactly the right way. It needed Denai Guerrera in 7 seasons of The Walking Dead to become the standout breakout star of that show. And by the way, Denai, when you hear this, please don't ever put hair on your head again, my darling.
Amen to that.
You are exquisite with the baldness. And Ayo, actress woman, I don't even know your name, but you are a walking goddess.
Can I jump in there?
I just need to holler at you.
Could that moment do for women with shaved heads what happened with Star Trek and Persis Kambata back in the first Star Trek movie in 1980?
I'm gonna let Samantha tackle that because I'm not gonna talk about a Black woman's hair, but a Black woman can
smart.
talk about
You smart, brother.
No, but Persis Kambata was the shaved head.
Yeah, no, I get it. I'm just saying she was not a star of Denai's magnitude when she appeared in that movie, and she basically fell off after it. But Denai and all the rest of the Dora Milaje, I mean, come summer, it's going to be some sisters rocking the ball.
So do we want to go there now? We want to go there early? Where we want to go with this? Because I'm ready.
The hype and the reality coming together.
Okay.
So that's a part of that conversation. How do you see it?
Okay, so first and foremost, I value and respect the fact that you all requested the impact of a woman, and a Black woman in particular, raised in this country to address the notions of hair. So as I come to this podcast, I'm going to come with a few different things. So I'm going to answer that question with the words of author Toni Morrison, who said, "So it was. A little Black girl yearns for the blue eyes of a little white girl, and the horror at her heart of her yearning is exceeded only by the evil of fulfillment." What that imagery in that scene when Denai ripped off the wig and when she was told it was a disgrace is the dichotomy to be a Black woman in this country, where you are not allowed to embrace that which comes from you naturally because of everything that tells you from your birth. It is everything but beautiful. So you find ways to adapt. And then society shames you for that. If you look at the internet and all the fun wig snatching virals that are going around, that is at the shame of a Black woman who is attempting to assimilate into something that she may have never inherently felt she needed to do. So the scenes in that movie were so poignant and so beautiful, because I think what it will do is allow a woman to be a woman in whatever way she chooses to express herself. Right now, I'm rocking the press and curl. Yesterday, I had my full-out afro. So I know who I am inherently within, but it took 41 years to get to this point. So my hope in answering that question, Mo, is that as women and men see that moment, they don't shame women who choose to wear a wig, but they understand the journey of the line in that movie of the disgrace that led them to that. And once they overcome and they choose it for themselves, their hair truly is their crown and glory. But it is not by mistake that every woman in that movie rocked her natural crown.
I know that's
it
right.
was needed.
To all of, there's a lot of, I get the sense that we're talking about the purposeful parts which all came together, that none of this was by chance, but by choice.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't a mistake,
Mm-hmm.
but it was positively about us. Let me put it another way. I saw this whole movie as a love letter to us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He loved us.
Like this movie is leading up to this movie. It was Black Panther gonna be lit. You know, that's what
So
it was.
lit.
And it was.
So lit.
Gonna
right?
be.
And it was.
So lit.
Show was.
And there was a lot of hype from us. Walking out of that movie, the first time seeing it, I realized, looking at the people around and looking on social media, people I know that had seen it, I see it is more than a movie. It is a movement which surpasses any type of hype that you have seen in any other film. The only comparable would be the original Star Wars. The original Star Wars and all the fanfare and all the pomp and ponce that went with dressing up and going out to the theater and doing all of that. When that all started, when I went to the theater just last night, you've got brothers rocking crowns and capes with women with baskets of flowers. You've got a whole group of sisters wearing afros looking like the Dora Milaje. You've got folks looking like they're coming from Wakanda's neighboring country of Zamunda. So they are neighboring, and you saw them and they were in the lobby chanting, dancing, singing, and I'm like, and these are people who did not come together as a group. This is a movement that surpasses any type of hype or word of mouth, because everyone who walks into it thinks one thing. You walk out of it standing a little taller, looking at your brother going, my man. You know, it's that type of movie.
Adding colonizer to your vocabulary again.
Man, bringing it back.
And can we bring it back to the fact of Disney really quick and the deep appreciation that they allowed Ryan to have this budget and then hands off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That
They clearly-
allowed for those lines.
They clearly had to have been hands off, and you make that Star Wars connection. They are very hands on
Mm-hmm.
with their Star Wars property, and they've been known to remove directors and everything with something which was very important to them. I assume they could have done the same thing if they felt it was going in a direction which was going to make them uncomfortable.
Well, they have. Disney has switched directors with Ant-Man. They have switched directors with
Han Solo.
no, not Han Solo, but just with their Disney films. They have switched directors on 2 different projects, and it's to the point where those projects came out right. So to show Disney, if it's not looking like it's going to be their vision, they will step in and go, "Oh, we're gonna have to remove you." Ryan, it was like, "Nah, bro, you got it." To the point where Kevin Feige has come out and now said today, this is the Marvel Cinematic Universe best film yet. The best.
And let's talk about that for a second. Not to dampen the hype of Kevin Feige, and he's right.
I think I know where you're going with this.
This is a good movie. The superhero elements of it take it to a slightly different place, but as a movie, as an examination of the cross-continental struggles of Black people in the diaspora, in the context of a compelling movie about the strength of family, the importance of family, the differences within each our Black experiences, with the Jabari tribe being kind of cast off, but then coming back into the fold, between Eric and T'Challa being flip sides of the same coin, kind of like on a Martin Malcolm kind of situation.
Absolutely.
With the colonial influences and the way that white human beings look at Black people, starting at the very beginning with the kind of unctuous white woman at the museum who thought she knew what was up and then got schooled by Eric Killmonger.
You're talking about the presumptuous arrogance?
Right. And then and it plays out a lot more with Everett Ross.
Yes.
But Claw, who had been caught
Mm-hmm.
and had been branded and had to be given Wakandan tech in order to get back in the game.
Thought he knew more.
And then got hoodwinked by Eric and was like, son of a bitch. And I thought you were just an American. It's like, every aspect of that made this a compelling movie in the same way that classic Bond films that set up rivalries and dealt with different things. The gadgets were fun. Letitia was amazing. All of these things that made it super, when he clawed the ground and lifted that daggone Audi onto its wheels and spun the corner, I looked at my wife and I was just like, damn. And so it had all of that, which is what makes a superhero movie great. But at its underpinnings, from the dramatic tension, from the conflicts, from the deeply emotional dialogue, especially made clear through Eric Killmonger's final statements in the movie,
Mm-hmm.
all of these pieces came together to make a wonderful film. And the fact that it was a superhero movie and got all of that budget, because superhero movies are the only ones that get these budgets these days, and that this story was played out on that tableau. I have seen movie theaters where every single screen was showing Black Panther.
Yes.
I've never seen that before. It didn't happen in Last Jedi, but every single theater, because of the hype. And it played out and it delivered.
Samantha, you want to get some of this.
I do, because the businesswoman in me says that Disney knew exactly what they were doing. They were brilliant. You look at Coogler, and yes, it looks like they did take a chance on him, but when you look at the budgets he's been given and how he has doubled and tripled them from 5 years ago with Fruitvale, $900,000 budget, $16 million, $40 million budget for Creed, made $173 million. So what do you think Disney is thinking? If he can double, triple that, if we give him $200 million, what's our bottom line? And just by you remembering the Audi, to me, says that sponsorship money that Disney likely got did it very well.
Oh, yeah.
Audi got their money's worth.
Right.
Even him throwing vibranium into the trunk of the Audi in the commercial.
So what do they say in Vegas? Bet on black.
Right, always.
Let me jump in there. We've pretty much covered the cultural impact, and we'll probably be talking about that throughout this conversation. There was a political backdrop which could not be denied, but could be ignored if you're just a casual viewer.
Mm-hmm.
You could take it or leave it as I saw it. I'm going to throw out some themes that I recognize, and then I want you to run with it. I saw a theme of Africans, how they may view African Americans historically and presently. I saw a theme of immigration, in the sense of, if you have immigrants, they may bring their problems with them. You have a theme of isolationism, whether you should use your resources to help anyone else or only for the benefit of your home country. There were so many competing themes which were going on of a political nature, which I think resonated more acutely in today's environment and more appropriate for today's environment, but did not get in the way of the movie. Tuwala, do you think that was fair in nature?
I think every single point that you just hit on played out seamlessly in this movie, because at no time in the film did they look to the screen and say, message,
or tell you what to think about
tell you
it.
what to think about
Yeah.
it. They gave you opposing views on every single thing they brought in, to the point where the villain, Killmonger, he's a villain that you really have to look at and go, hey, man,
we gonna go there now?
Like I'm just saying, his motivations, what he wanted to bring liberation to Black people that are oppressed across the country, you may have gone about it the wrong way, just trying to storm the castle, but damn it, you're right.
I couldn't disagree with him intellectually.
Yes.
With the exception of his proposed methods.
His proposed methods, wrong. The idea that he was presenting, I wholeheartedly understand.
Y'all up in here living comfortably.
Okay, so I'm going to offer perhaps today's first dissenting view, because I think his dad was there. I think his hatred for T'Chaka, made manifest by his eventual hatred for basically everything Wakanda, twisted him too early on for him to honestly believe the hype he was selling. I get that he was selling that, and that worked for Wakabi. But honestly, when you go in there and you burn all the heart-shaped herb because Sister Girl said, oh, but for the next king, ain't gonna be no next king, burn it all.
Mm-hmm.
He choked her out because she wanted to maintain Wakanda's source of strength. He was a tyrant selling a long con. Now, I get that
You're saying he was disingenuous, he was not sincere.
I don't think he was sincere, and here's why. When, and this is heavy spoiler territory. Black Panther went out on the mission. Wakabi said, bring him, kill him, or bring him home.
Talking about Claw.
Talking about Claw.
Yes.
Black Panther had Claw. Claw wasn't going anywhere. Eric Killmonger took Claw from Wakandan Justice and used that as a playing piece on his board to overthrow the country. He did not, if he was just concerned, because remember, T'Challa was almost there. Nakia had basically sold him on the idea that he needed to be doing more.
Yeah.
Because he loves her. And now that she's returning that love, we saw what happened at the end of the movie.
But you're saying, you're making like it's a binary choice.
No,
it had to be either or. It could have been both ends.
What-
He wanted to overthrow Wakanda. He wanted some get back. And he also wanted to liberate black people around the world.
Because he grew up in an Oakland where it was going down.
Okay, but hear me though.
Mm-hmm.
Just like T'Challa said, you want to become just like them. Wakabi wasn't trying to dominate the world. We're going, sun never sets on Wakanda, all of that. Nakia and Wakabi were like, we can do more. We can help to right wrongs. Killmonger's way was not the Wakandan way. Killmonger's way was Killmonger's way, and he was putting on the shell of Wakanda in order to meet those ends. I don't think it was genuine.
Yet and still, I hear everything you're saying, but where I go left from all of that is the line, you want to be just like them. And as you said, Tawala, Wakandans don't know what it was like to be a young black man in 1992 Oakland, and as the imagery showed on the screen by Coogler, in fear of a black planet with Public Enemy. So somebody who grew up in the utopia of Wakanda could not ever fathom what his world that Killmonger was envisioning, a world where there is no Tamir, Trayvon, Rakisha, and the list goes on.
You're gonna
in
be a long
Wakanda,
time
I'm going to be a long time, so I'm not going to go there.
Names.
But in Wakanda, they could not conceptualize that. So the thought of you want to be just like them, no, Killmonger wanted to liberate his people by using the technology so that they no longer had to live in fear of just breathing, their very existence.
Okay, except two things. Nakia did go out. They had spies throughout the whole world. So those spies were exposed to the same sorts of things, not the exact same thing, because Oakland was Oakland, but there were Wakandans who were sending information back to Wakanda. Wakanda knew that stuff was going on in the world, but Wakanda was being super isolationist. Now, Nakia...
There it is. That's the point.
Nakia went out to help those women who had been, I mean, they didn't call them Boko Haram, but it was basically Boko Haram.
Yeah.
Right.
She went out and she said, I've got to make a difference. And to counter your other point, at the end of the movie, one of the last things Eric Killmonger said is, I'm going to go out and kill anybody who thinks the way you do, T'Challa. It wasn't just about liberating his people. It was about him being in charge of the entire world.
I
and
think
him
that-
willing
I think
to
it's
do
all of those
whatever
things.
he
But
wanted to do.
It's all of that.
No, I understand, but
It's all of that.
you don't tell me you're concerned about black people and you're going to kill the entire Dora Milaje and anybody else who says, but I have a
agree.
problem.
No, They're not competing ideas.
His
Right.
thing was he had no problem with the Dora Milaje. They were by his side for the moment. When he went into the temple, he wasn't like, I'm executing all of you. He didn't say
It wasn't a coup in that regard.
Until he came back to challenge, and then once the Dora Milaje left him, he got back to the point of anybody who is with T'Challa, you're dead. Your children are dead. I'm killing white people's children. I'm killing everybody's children.
He fought the Dora Milaje because they attacked him. Had they stood by his side, he would have been cool. Because Wakabi and his people, he had no problem with. He said, "Go get him." They went to go get him. He was cool. He had no problem with people on side. Yes, he was tyrannical in his approach and what he wanted to do, sitting in the throne like the Black Caesar, saying the sun will never set on the Wakandan Empire. Yeah, he's going off of their philosophy and their teaching, which was foolish because Rome fell. You know what I'm saying? So it's like
British Empire fell.
Yeah, but it's like, and they all
Every
had
empire,
that same.
right.
They all had that exact same philosophy. They all had spies. They all had people elsewhere. That ties into a historical way of how tyrants come to power,
which is why it's counter-African. That's part of that's part of my point. You were born there. I worked in Africa over the course of 4 years, and some of the conversations that were happening online today were about where there have been strong conflicts between African people from various countries and their perception of Americans. And that was played out. That was another of the themes that was played out. And I guess what I'm saying is that even warrior peoples, from Shaka Zulu to all of the kings of Western Africa, who, you know, and the Malian Empire and
Queen
the Ghanaian
Nzinga.
Empire and Queen Nzinga and all of that, even the pharaohs, the African approach, and this is what made them so ripe for the picking, frankly, from a lot of colonial influences. The African approach runs counter to that notion, and so. And that's a continent, almost a continent-wide thing, as opposed to just being country by country. The pure African approach has been one of embrace. And the idea that you're going to flip this technological utopian paradise into a war machine to dominate, kill children, sit on top of the throne, and ruthlessly smack down any opposition. The very fact that they had a council in an absolute monarchy is an indication that runs counter to the way they do things.
Yeah.
And so it was anti-Wakandan, even though there were Wakandan elements who felt sympathy for the position that he was purporting to take, which is, I'm gonna help Black people because Black people need help.
Yeah, but let's not dismiss the fact that he is or was a psychopath.
Right.
Let's not dismiss the fact that he was a genius. They already put that out there.
MIT, yeah.
The fact that his motives were not pure does not discount the intellectual honesty of them as far as wanting to right the wrongs of the past. And we can go deeper into the whole Martin versus Malcolm conversation, where Martin was arguing for the end of segregation. Malcolm was arguing, I would say, for revolution. And those are two different concepts here. Well, he wanted revolution.
They came a lot closer together by the time they were done, which is part of why the assassinations took place. But yeah, to your point broadly, before when they were considered to be at opposite corners, Martin was considered to be more of the pacifist, nonviolent, blah, blah, blah. And Malcolm was certainly speaking more of the language of by any means necessary, and the shot with the picture with the gun in his hand and all that. And some of the rhetoric of the Nation of Islam was definitely not as passive as Martin's was until Martin turned a corner. But again, the fact that he was speaking intellectual truths does not mean that his character, and this is a pretend character, obviously, but his character was written to advance the plot of the movie. And to me, what came through, especially at the end, was that whatever core of truth there was, and we got a little bit of that when he actually went into the ancestral plane of Oakland, the pocket plane, because he couldn't connect with Wakanda, but he was in Oakland with his dad. And they had the whole conversation about, we were lost, and then he says, well, maybe they're lost, and then
That's
he woke
why
up.
They can't find us. Yep.
He can't find them, partly because he hadn't actually won and he wasn't a legitimate king, but also because philosophically, I found him to be lost from the spiritual connection and the essence of what Wakanda was. But I know Samantha's champing at the bit.
No, also,
No, I was listening. I was listening
Samantha,
to both of you
I
guys.
want you to respond to Thomas, and then I want you to move the conversation forward because who better to talk about the women of Wakanda and how they played into this dynamic as soldiers and also leaders within the same context of this movie.
It's interesting to segue because the line you said, or actually you just said he wasn't a legitimate king. To me, the saddest line in the film was when T'Challa said, "You will never be a king." And it was so sad to me because in America, and he was raised as an American Black man, this is how we are all raised. But in reality, we're born kings and queens by our birth and our birthright that the movie touched on. We just don't know it. And so that is why I think that final line where he is dying on the sunset and says, you know, bury me in the land of my ancestors in the ocean, because they knew that bondage.
Death was a better option than bondage.
Death was a better option than bondage was so poignant. And I think so many of us here and raised in the United States probably verbally said, you know, I did. I was like,
that was a visceral.
You know, right.
That was a gut punch.
We felt that
gut punch,
because we feel that in a way that our brothers and our sisters on the continent of our motherland don't. They, in my travels there, they don't even really teach slavery in the regions that I went to very much because it didn't impact them as much.
Yeah. No.
We're on the back end. You know, we're after the transatlantic slave trade. So that's where our history began here in the United States as Black Americans. So to hear that line was just so sad. And so moving forward into the triumph of the female characters in this movie, it was powerful. We knew that was going to be powerful, right? I mean, we saw that by the photos and the trailers, but it just went beyond all expectations. And like you said, the 7 seasons of Walking Dead with the 9.
Wait, what were your expectations? Visually, you knew how they were going to be presented, but what did you experience as a Black woman? You're going to connect in a way that these 3 gentlemen, including me, could not ever connect.
We saw our brilliance with our beauty boldly asserted in a way that was a full circle. I've seen articles about feminism and the patriarchy that exists in Black Panther, and I haven't read too much of it, but I will say this. As a Black woman, I reject the notion of feminism. It is rooted in racism. It was not a movement that was with us in mind, although we supported it. If anything, I would go closer to Alice Walker's assertion of womanism. And unlike feminism that often rejects anything that is male, womanism inherently embraces Black men and the Black struggle.
And let's not forget the suffragists weren't exactly fans of the civil rights movement. It wasn't because you supported the suffragist movement that you inherently supported the Voting Rights Act. That is not true. It did not happen that way.
I was, when you think about the non-lead characters in this movie, okay? So you had Black Panther and you had Eric Killmonger. But almost everyone else of consequence was a woman. And even in some of the soft power roles, so on the tribal council, you had the old mother with the big earrings, and then you had the sister with
that was
from
everybody's grandmother.
That was everybody's mama.
Big mama, whatever.
She sat up in there and we don't need a warrior, we need a king. And he was like, well, we got to do both. And then you had the sister girl from the mining tribe with the things on the end, and them speaking for their entire tribe. We will not challenge today. We will not challenge today. And then Wakabi's daddy was one of the dudes. And then you had M'Baku, obviously, speaking from his tribe. And then whoever even Nakia.
Yeah, Nakia from the River Tribe,
spoke. And so you had 3 women represent, well, technically, I think the lip plate guy was the River Tribe guy, but Nakia was from that tribe, whatever. But you had women all up and through this in power positions being heated. Angela Bassett, Queen Mother with that crown. My God. So you just had all of these women that were doing everything in this movie and holding it together, literally bringing the title character back to life.
Sounds like America.
But we have a question from a listener
We do.
on one of the most important characters in the film.
We do.
Hi, Nerdcast. My name is Courtney Jones, and I would love if you guys can discuss Shuri. She is my favorite character on Black Panther and the epitome of Black girl magic.
You know, thank you for your question, Courtney. It is a wonderful question. From her first appearance, I thought Shuri was the personification not only of Black girl magic, but of Black girl joy. Every aspect of her performance just exuded this energy of just, look, I'm here. And when she looked at his bare toes and said, "What are those?" It was just, she was everybody's little sister. She was Q from the Bond films. She was just everything.
She
so
hit me differently.
aspirational.
Really? She hit me differently. And I was saddened because I was thinking during the movie, I can't think of another movie which had such a consequential Black girl as the centerpiece of a movie. Everything spun around her. It didn't matter when Black Panther was running up and down the street in South Korea. It came back to Shuri making sure that his behind was on that car.
In the right place.
Yeah.
Place.
And the way she
And also with Agent Ross and the ship, everything revolved around her. I can't think of another moment or character in cinema history, including Black cinema history, which had a girl so consequential in the storyline in which the world was at stake.
Absolutely. And the way that she so nonchalantly just asserted, because that's how it is in Wakanda, that yes, I built this technology.
Right.
I built those, the light rail. She very,
Right.
passingly said, "Oh yes, I built that," and she was excited about it. And something as art imitates life imitates art. When you see that Serena Williams brought the young girls from Black Girls Code to see that movie, it is the future where they do see this young girl running the technology of a nation that makes everything Wakanda is.
For me,
And it ain't special.
I knew that
Veil.
Shuri was the truth when walking out of that theater. My 7-year-old little girl comes to me and she says, "Okay, Daddy, I talked to Mommy, and she says, when I turn 18, I can change my name to Wakanda Shuri Sharp."
Oh.
And I almost melted in that moment because I'm like, you got it. She was like, she's just like me. She has all types of ideas. And you know how I'm always coming up with stuff? So is she. And I'm a little sister because Mason is my big brother. So I'm like Shuri. And she saw herself in that film more than she has in any film I've ever taken her to. I have never seen her walk out of a film with female characters in it and her want to be them.
Can I just say, this would be, and this is in hindsight, after I've really tried to stay away from articles this weekend because I'm in full-fledged, celebration mode, but one did catch my eye, and that is in the fact that in the comic books, the Dora Milaje, their characters were of the QT pop, the queer, transgender people of color. And so there are concerns within the community that aspect of us as a culture had been erased from the film. And I am not criticizing Black Panther because it's a solid 10++ for me. However, as we celebrate everything that this historical revolution means in terms of representation, it is not religious-based. It is a part of our culture, and we must be clear and consistent with taking a stand that we will not erase you.
I'm going to jump in there because we're actually melding a couple of ideas here. First, we're talking about for the children. That was the next topic, and how it may resonate with children. And there are also some sophisticated themes which are also being viewed by children. And this goes back to the politics of it all in terms of African-American community, our uncomfortable relationship with people who are of same-sex relationships, who may not be heterosexual, who, because this is a 21st century movie. And how do we go about reconciling all of these mature themes through when we have such young eyes who are seeing it and then asking their parents, well, what about this and what about that? Does that make sense?
It does, but it's...
Well, I'm going to jump on a couple of things of this. Directly addressing that point, I think we're beyond the time when a 13-year-old, because this is a PG-13 rated movie, I think we're beyond the time where a 13-year-old child is not aware that there are same-gender loving black people. So I don't know that I totally buy that argument. But I will say that Ta-Nehisi Coates adding that dimension to the Dora Milaje is a relatively new aspect of their relationship.
Yes, it is.
The Dora Milaje, throughout history in the comic book, didn't even really get introduced until the Hudlin era reboot. Mm-hmm. So there was Hudlin and Christopher Priest, and at that time...
Is this early 90s, just for context?
This is 90s. Mm-hmm. At that time, when the Dora Milaje were introduced, they were actually introduced as prospective wives to T'Challa.
Yes.
They were a way to bring together and kind of solidify dissent amongst the other tribes. So anybody who's in the Dora Milaje, you're from this tribe, you're from that tribe, well, you might be the next queen, so we can't act up because we want our tribe to be represented as the next queen. Now, because it was a bunch of them, and that was kind of problematic in its own way of he had these bald-headed sisters who were down to get down with the king, they removed all of that. And in removing that, they also removed Coates's new invention, because the Midnight Angels and all that with the two that ran away from the Dora Milaje and started their own little revolution, that's not even 2 years old.
Yeah.
So in the overall history of his,
new.
so
they hit me as asexual, not bisexual or even gay.
They hit you as asexual. Hold on.
No. In the comic, in
the movie, they did.
No, they were. Well, first of all,
they did because they were, for me, single-minded in their focus.
Really?
Well, but Okoye was Wakabi's woman.
Yeah.
Now the rest of them we didn't, except for Ayo.
Yeah, but see, that's the thing.
And I will never accept Ayo because Ayo was everything. When she told Black Widow,
she had privileges that the other ones didn't.
Yeah.
She killed me with that. All I'm saying is that to me, Coogler's choice. I will say it's Coogler's choice because I'm not the biggest fan of Coates' run on Black Panther. Let me just say that. Not because of the LGBTQ SGL stuff. I just think things that he has since he has introduced some elements that kind of go against some of the inherent excellence of Wakanda in his storylines, I'm not here for it the same way I was for the Hudlin run. The Hudlin, Ramita, and the Christopher Priest stuff, all of that was
runs
absolutely amazing.
Yeah, that's the stuff that's in my garage.
That's what this is.
Yeah.
Black Panther is informed by those runs.
Yeah.
Okay.
Never Been Conquered, all of this, and superior technology, yada, 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 all of that. They de-aged Shuri a little bit. She's younger in the movie than she is in the comics by like a lot.
A lot.
Like, she's a younger
10
sister,
years.
but she's a grown woman.
Yeah.
Thank you for that education.
So,
And she's actually the current Black Panther.
She's the current Black Panther now. But I just didn't, when I saw that pushback from that community, I didn't jump into it hot and heavy, except to say, recognize that this is new. The Dora Milaje have not always been about that. And the two who did splinter off to do their own little adventures, they are lovers and they are not asexual at all. But the rest of them
right.
Yeah, the rest of them have been historically since the late 90s prospective queens, and then he married Storm, and then he divorced Storm or no, whatever. So it's not, I don't think it's a fair critique to say that he hid LGBTQ issues away because it's so new in the mythos that it's you got to pick and choose what
I
you go
think
for.
maybe then you explained it for me. Not necessarily asexual, but they were chaste, maybe, to save themselves to be potential queen.
Just maintaining themselves as warrior monks.
Right.
There
we go.
Oh, I didn't catch this at all. Wait, hold on. The womanist in me. Hold on.
Certainly in the movie, they didn't get as much development outside of Okoye and to a lesser extent Ayo.
Okay, so maybe this goes back to what you were saying. I want to answer your question about how could Disney have addressed it, and even how you said that community. I just want to assert that community is our community.
Yeah.
Hence, which
Agreed.
is part of the challenge.
And
so in the film, if it was ever addressed, or even in the future, it's nothing that's even thought of. It's addressed the same way that you hear, "Really, my love?" and who she's speaking to.
Mm-hmm.
As you said, 13 plus, they are that. We are that. We are Wakanda. So they are a part of that. So that would be my literal only critique of this film, if I had one, which came after the fact, because since I am not a same gender loving SGL, as my brother over here to the left threw out there, I appreciate that. Since I am not a same gender loving woman, it didn't immediately stand out to me. But when I heard my other same gender loving men and women speak of that, I could not just discount it, because that would be to discount everything that Wakanda means to us.
But I think this is unfair, because that means this movie has to take on the burden of 400 years of us being on this continent.
But it does. It does. And that is a very salient point. Maybe unfairly so, but Black Panther literally has our entire world view on its shoulders right now.
Ooh,
and
that's a heavy burden.
It's a heavy burden that has been placed
for an entertainment property
on Black Panther. Again, in all of our lives, our parents' lives, took my mother to see this film. She says, I have never seen anything like this in my life. I have never seen anything like this in my life. My son has never seen anything in his life. 3 generations of strong Black folks. You've never seen this. Ever. Ever, ever, ever.
And the one thing I wanted to say, how I was so shocked that you brothers didn't see the sexuality of those women warriors. I just got to go back to a womanist, where we embrace female sexuality, whereas feminists also distance themselves from it. And I'm not going to be a fan probably of a lot of women right now, but I believe there is a traditional order to things. So I'm a strong woman that needs a stronger man. Beyonce said, ran by the men, but the women keep the tempo. In that scene, when they laid their weapons down and he yielded to her because he saw that the Black love of revolutionary, and they did that slow pan to all the Black men and Black women at war with one another, when we must come together to fight the bigger battle, was one of the most powerful moments in that film to me. And that was when I was like, yes.
But see, for me, I'm trying to look at it through the eyes. These are warriors, not sexual objects. I'm
a warrior and a sexual object every day.
No, absolutely. But I'm saying the purpose as far as characters, they were not there to titillate, even though they were physically beautiful. So I'm not looking at them through the lens of who are they dating, or whether they're gay, whether they're hetero. None of that ever crossed my mind, because when I say purpose, their job was to protect Wakanda.
Saw in this movie, I saw them as the baddest soldiers to ever pick up a weapon. And
I'm not thinking about who they're dating.
That's where I was at.
I will say this. Just like in Wonder Woman, I felt that there were scenes where if you were looking for that, you could point to it and say, I'll take it. Like in Wonder Woman, it was an island of women. And so they never said Philippus was going after anybody, right? But you could see when their sisters were cut down and they were holding their sisters and they were in the crying and stuff.
Yeah, there was an expression of love.
There was an expression of love. And to me, in the sequence where the one Dora was killed by Killmonger, he was holding a knife to her neck, and Okoye and the rest of the two other Doras who were there at that time, that heartrending scream. And when, to me, any same gender loving woman who was looking at these badass sisters kicking ass and seeing them work together, if she wanted to connect the dots, I think she could connect it. They didn't make it.
I'm not mad if they did.
But even men, I am really shocked, my brothers, because for me,
don't put that on me. He was the one that said that shit.
Right here, moment to Wallace. So
because that's the way I look at movies. I'm not looking to sexualize the woman in every movie. I'm just not.
That. So for me, though, because I can see our beauty and our fierceness all rolled up into one. For me, again, that charging scene with the rhino, and he licked her face, and the way she stood there and accepted it, every element of them oozed of intentional sexuality.
That's
from
fine.
Their dress.
It never hit me like that.
I mean,
I'll tell you when it hit me. When they were walking in the United Nations and Denai had that form-fitted dress with the little triangles cut out of it, and Ayo was standing 2 inches taller to the right. I was like,
don't get it twisted. These are some of the most beautiful women I've seen. Don't get twisted. I didn't say that I didn't see beauty in them. I did not attribute a sexualization to them. That's
I don't think they were
something
sexualized.
to
I do
really,
not think they were
really,
sexualized.
really point out, when looking at the women in Black Panther against the women that we typically see leading
Mhm.
in our films.
Yes.
We normally see women, and this is not a color struck
Come
or
on now.
colorization
Come on now.
conversation,
But it's facts.
But these are
Hashtag
facts. The women that you see in this film, you do not see in film really ever. You do not see dark sisters leading, being beautiful, being wanted. The fact that she had to tell Okoye had to tell T'Challa on that mission, when you see your girl, don't freeze. When you see her, don't freak. And when he saw her, that
froze.
beautiful black face in the jungle, he froze and said, "Nakia, hi."
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying? Like,
Say it again.
hi.
And every man who's ever loved has been there.
Yes.
Yeah,
and
no,
I saw that and I was like, oh, the love that relationship there. These are the little things that just blew me away, that I'm like, Disney, at no point did someone come into the writing room and say, hey, we're going to have to make some cast changes because it just doesn't seem real. I don't know.
Jump in on this one too, because
Yes.
for me, colorism was one of the most important themes of this film for me.
Oh, I agree. I
So,
agree. Go ahead with that.
Again, going back to, and I'm sorry, brother Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, all this fuss over a superhero movie. Yes, absolutely. Because the revolution was indeed televised on 14 by 48 IMAX 3D digital screens all across this country. And Tawala, brother, your point about in Hollywood, you always have to have a female with European standards, be it a white woman or dang light, bright, dang near white woman. In even our own movies from the Black community, may that era be behind us. Because what this film did, and I do believe it was intentional for Coogler, because he could have added the different beautiful shades of the Black spectrum in there, but every single woman in that movie was a dark-skinned woman, and she had natural, thick, kinky hair, and there are
No European features.
no European
Featured.
features. And for people who say, oh, but it's not that serious, I implore you to pick up a book called The Color Complex, because it discusses directly the social economic factors that go into when colorism is in play. When you look at the media with our Black men, and they are super predators. I ain't forgot that campaign. They are super predators, over-criminalized or overly sexualized if they're dark-skinned, or as we see on the internet, light-skinned dudes be like. This movie allows for just the beauty of a Black people to be free in who they are without the stereotypes.
I will jump on a different piece of this conversation. First of all, I don't think he actually could have had light-skinned chicks in here, because 90% of this movie was set in Wakanda. And Wakanda didn't have any colonial influences. Wakanda didn't have any survivors of rape.
But they
they
could have ancillary characters if they wanted to.
But you go to a place like Kenya, right? Even within Kenya, where there are just lots and lots of different tribes. You got the Luo, who are Black people. And you have Kikuyu, who are less Black, closer to Ethiopia, Eritrean, kind of fine, thin features, more like cocoa-y sort of complexion, like most of the cast members, frankly. But you don't see somebody like my coloring. My brother is darker, but my mother and I are, well, my mother's lighter than me. Me and my son and my mother, we're Mzungu in Kenya. That's
You'd be
whitey.
considered
But
white.
what if you
That's
go to
white.
South Africa?
But South Africa is different. I'm
Yes,
just
it
saying
is.
this place, South Africa you had a whole colored cast in South
Correct.
Africa. But in Wakanda,
Okay.
you never had white intrusion at all. And you didn't have
Very true.
Wakandans
You
coming
Very
back.
true.
Very
Very true.
You
I
didn't
accept
have
that.
Very true.
Wakandans bringing
I
back
accept
some
that.
white guy
too.
who maybe had a little half-assed
Let's,
child.
let's bring it back to then Killmonger and why Killmonger's mother was never brought back home.
Well, we didn't really touch on that, did we? We said she was American. You sensed that she was from Oakland. Killmonger is lighter than Sterling K. Brown.
Hello.
We're going deep.
He's lighter than
shades now.
So you could, and Zuri didn't touch on it, but you could maybe imply that the woman he fell in love with was not a black woman. But
I wouldn't say that. I would just say she wasn't Wakandan.
She wasn't Wakandan. She surely wasn't Wakandan.
And she definitely wasn't someone that he felt he could bring home because he
didn't.
He did not tell the king.
And we didn't address that really at all. What happened to her? Why wasn't she around? Why wasn't she there to take care of? I mean, I know in the comic books it was different because both his parents were killed from a whole claw thing. But in the movie, she was just gone.
You know what? I think that's a good stopping point.
I think that's a good point for us to stop.
And we'll take a quick break, and then we're going to come back and deal with who was Killmonger's mama and why we never knew more about her. We're back in a moment.
About this.
Nerds.
Nerds. What is a nerd?
And we're back, part 2 of Nerdcast 11, Black Panther. I know you've probably seen the movie by now. I hope you've seen it more than once by now. It is more than an event. It's more than a movie. It's been a phenomenon, something that we've not seen, something which has not been seen in cinema in American history. And I say that specifically, American history. This is something that I thought was a love letter to African Americans. It was a love letter to all people of the African diaspora, and we can all partake in and enjoy. And before the break, we were talking in a general sense about the women of Wakanda. And let me parse that, the women of Wakanda, but there was a woman who was connected to Wakanda in terms of Eric Killmonger's mother, who was referenced to a number of times. We saw her not at all. We know nothing about her. But what can we extract from not only her conspicuous absence, but her obvious impact? Who wants to take that first?
You know, looking at the fact that when they addressed the fact that the mother, to me, I took it as she was not presentable. She would not have, one, because she was an outsider, but for him to, because in the conversation that Zuri had, he said, unbeknownst to the king, your uncle had fallen in love with someone, and that was like,
but
nope.
And
had
uncle
a child.
Had a child and was the guardian of the child.
Yes.
Because Killmonger, Eric, lived with him.
Yes.
So there was something obviously not quite right with the mother.
So for me, and maybe it's because I am a woman and I am a mother, and the only thing that keeps most mothers from their children is death. And so with the theme being so intrinsic to this movie about the relationship between Black men and their fathers, which is critical, and how they explored that through the imagery and going back to the ancestral planes. When Killmonger first goes back on the ancestral plane to connect with his father in Oakland, and his father says, "No tears for me," and he says, "Everybody dies." At that point, I accepted that perhaps his mother was
deep.
dead.
Had predeceased.
That's deep.
Wow.
Yeah,
That's deep.
I was going the same place. I think that it was clear that may have been part of what contributed to the radicalization of Njobu, because Zuri does say that your uncle was radicalized. So, and even in the conversations that Njobu had with T'Chaka before the clause, he said they are being killed, drugs are being put in their community, they're over-policed, and da-da-da-da-da. So I think it's a reasonable inference, because when he grabbed his father in death, there was no mother. And clearly, throughout whatever he was picked up and you know, whatever circumstances, the mother was not there. The mother was not there to be a stabilizing influence. So he was everything I ever loved, he said. They took away everything I ever loved. So your comment combined with that, absolutely, there was a presumption that she was dead, but because the fathers and the relationship between fathers was a central element of this story, I think she was basically just sidelined because it was just a matter of
And
time.
also one other thing in terms of presentable, the line was not your father fell in love with somebody. The line was your father fell in love with an American, which goes back to
Go ahead.
Their isolationism.
They're not only
but
take it.
The whole feeling about African Americans we have divergent paths in history as far as the Middle Passage and so forth. And this has always been my feeling that there was a feeling of a superiority complex that your relatives ended up as slaves, but not my relatives. Is that a fair statement?
I have had conversation when I was going to Pasadena City College, and I was kind of co-captain of the Black Student Alliance. I made it my mission to go around the quad and try to rally people and get them to come to the meetings. And none of the African students would come. And it always used to strike me as weird. And one day I went and I asked, I said, hey, you know, we're having the BSA meetings up here. You know, we're all coming together. And one young sister, she came to me, she said, we don't really know how to interact with you all. And I said, excuse me? And she said, for us coming here, all we know about American blacks is that you all are in gangs and things like that, because out there, movies like Boys in the Hood and Menace to Society, they were real for them. For these young people at the time going to school with me, that is how they thought we were. She told me that her and the community of students that were there with her, they were afraid of us because they didn't know when we were going to go off and pull
like old dog.
Yeah, like old dog, like what you say about my mama. You know, they and that was for her, that was like, and it was almost like she told me that, and then she looked over at her friends who were like giving her a scornful look, and she said, okay, I gotta go. And then she just ran off, and I'm like, damn, is that, huh? Wow.
I would say that, well, two things. One, on the continent, I think that's less true. Because even though they didn't have slavery in the same way that we had institutional chattel slavery over here, the colonial oppression over there was very reminiscent. I mean, there's nobody in the former Belgian Congo who doesn't understand what white people can do to black people and how they can be horrible. There are no people in South Africa who don't understand that white people can be evil. Now, East Africans, that wasn't the main port of call for slavery. That was a kind of a Western African thing. So, but the influence of the British was very keenly felt. The British colonization was very keenly felt. So all through up in Eastern Africa, Central Africa, South Africa, you know, to a lesser extent up north, because that was more across the north and into the Western North was more of an Arabic kind of incursion. It's different. But over here, if you come from Africa and make it to America, you're on a different mission. You're not necessarily on a mission to come and make friends. You're on a mission to get the best education you can, to advance your brain, to get your solid career. Some people will go back, others will not. But when you're coming to America to spend $50,000 a year at USC, you're not necessarily, your primary goal is not to embrace Little Yachty.
Yeah, but it doesn't mean that you look upon Little Yachty as your equal.
I would like to answer your question about, is there potentially a superiority complex? And I'm about to get my Yvette Nicole Brown on, how she has her little journal on the Talking Dead. The first time I went to the continent of Africa, I kept a journal because for so many African Americans, even by the hyphenated name, African Americans, for us, Africa is this far off Wakandan land, although it's here in the present. So for me, I was so excited and I had so many questions of, this is the Mecca journey, you know, what is it going to be like? And it took me to get all the way to Africa to realize I was American. And so just a little entry from...
Wait, say that again.
Say that again.
Say that again.
It took me to go to Africa to realize I was an American, which going back to the questions of this movie and the mother and perhaps why was she not taken to Wakanda? I would assert because a lot of the mind state there is, and I'm just going to read direct from my journal in Africa when I was there, that I said, I'm sorry, I know this is taking a long time. As I stutter resistance and refute, I'm gently cut off at the pass with one more final nail when my South African sister dismissively says, and you are an American, so it doesn't matter. It's not as if this was new, but the concept of kinship not being extended was unexpected. I kept hearing, you're American, you're not Black. But in America, I am both. I'm an American and I am Black. And I have a culture. I realized that when I came home, our culture here in America is our languages. It is our regional dialects, whether you're from the dirty South, shawty, you from New York, son, done. You from the West Coast, we roll our R's, you know what I'm saying? So all of that is our unique culture as Black Americans. And we are not perhaps seen as insiders in Wakanda, which is why I think the mother wasn't brought home.
A quick digression and note. I don't want to skip over the authenticity of the presentation of the movie in terms of African culture. The fact that they were using a real African dialect, South African dialect, in the movie, I think it's inextricably linked to why this is going to resonate around the world.
Mm-hmm. Yes. There are already theaters pre-sold out throughout the continent of Africa. Anywhere there's a theater, they're like, give us our copy.
And won't need subtitles.
Yes, no. give us our copy. Give it to us now. When it was premiered in Lupita Nyong'o's hometown, standing ovation for quite some time. They stood and cheered and chanted when it was over. That shows you how this film is going to do worldwide.
And I would like to say, not in Wakanda, but in reality, just from my experiences, and perhaps you can share yours, we are embraced. Oh. When we come and we go to Africa, I've been to 4 countries there. They say brother, they say sister. And one of the most powerful moments I had was the first time I went to South Africa, Durban. I was walking along the shore that looks like Miami Beach, except it's all Black folk, even though we couldn't be there until 1994. Wow. But there was this fitness group going on. And, I like to get my fitness on. So I joined in, and it was called Mbliza Fitness. And the woman who helmed it said, will you be back? And I said, I will. 2 years later, I came back and I was walking, and it was the same people. I didn't think she would remember me. I walked by and she screamed and she ran to me and she hugged me and she said, my sister, you returned. And it was just so emotional for me.
No, that got me messed up. Man. Wow.
It's an astounding experience. And I was in one of the groups that I was chatting with about the movie. I said, every Black person from this country, if they have the chance, needs to make the visit. I lived and worked off and on in Kenya. In Uganda is where we ended up doing 3 years of the show. In Kenya, we did the first year. In Tanzania, when we were doing recruitment. In Malawi, when we were doing recruitment, and also Ghana. And so each of those places is very different. Malawi, to me, is kind of the distillation of what I thought Africa was going to be. Malawi is very lush and green, and when you're flying over it, it looks like jungly, like when you think Tarzan and trees and stuff. And when you get to the Malawi airport, driving to it, because they only have like 5 flights a day. So when you come to LAX, you hear, all of this. Driving to the Lilongwe is where the airport is. Driving there for like 2 miles, it was just birds chirping and stuff. It was silent getting up to the airport and just sitting in the airport surrounded by all this beautiful stuff. Nairobi is a major city. That's it's a city in the way that most cities are. Accra is a major city with a major airport. Kampala is a major city. But we went out to the source of the Nile when we were in the middle of production. And so
say that again. The what?
The source of the I canoed into the middle of the thing and dipped my hand in the source of the Nile. And
Oh, wow.
And they have a brand of beer there. Nile beer made with Nile water. And to go there and just to be in a place where you were surrounded by blackness, and my experience mirrored yours, where English is a predominant language, like it's technically an official language of Tanzania. Nobody speaks English there. It's Kiswahili. Mm-hmm. That's basically it. Mm-hmm. But for the folks that do know English and know that I'm very clearly not from the continent, but I still have people that I communicate. The last time I worked there was 2010, and I'm still Facebook friends, and on birthdays and stuff, people are still, and hey, Tom, how are you doing? And I'm seeing pictures of people who've gotten married that I knew there and their kids and all of that. The relationship still exists. And so to go there is to really, it's like drinking the juice of the heart-shaped herb. You just become full of this spiritual experience of being in a place where you were not othered.
Yes.
And this
not
movie,
othered. That's
not
powerful.
othered. And this movie did such an excellent job. I can tell you, Nairobi has the world's biggest slum. There's 1 million people in a slum. And a movie theater in that slum is smaller than this room we're in now. Mm-hmm. And they just have DVDs, and they have a ticker board outside the size of an A4 piece of paper that shows what movies they're showing at what times. And it's a different movie every time, because that's where you go. You go to this small place and you play DVDs. I guarantee you that this movie is going to push any other release off screens for weeks because they don't have enough they don't have 16 screen movie theaters everywhere. In some of the bigger cities, perhaps in South Africa, they'll have multiplexes, but you don't have 4 screens maybe at the nice movie theaters in Nairobi. Right. So if it's a singleton, it's going to be Black Panther for a while.
Something I think we've undersold. We've given credit where credit has been due in terms of the direction, in terms of the writing, but let's not skip over the caliber of the talent which had been assembled. You have 2 Academy Award winners. Mm-hmm. You have 2 Academy Award nominees, maybe a winner by the time the Oscars roll around in next month.
Right.
What other superhero movie, air quotes, has that ever happened?
Oh yeah, no, you just don't. Every single person that they cast in this film has been in a powerful role prior to.
All leads.
I mean,
all of them are leads in their own right.
You got Martin Freeman. You've got 2 casts from Lord of the Rings in this movie.
Yeah.
This was a very serious cast put together. Again, they pulled out everything. They opened up the door and said, just go. Who do you want in it? Just get them. Get them. And everyone stepped up. Angela Bassett's on-off accent in the Biggie movie bothered me. She killed it in this.
Yes, Angela.
She murdered it. In this film, I'm like, and looking still just as young as the Dora Milaje. I'm like,
come on, Angela.
I'm like, you with your gray dreads, you are still
those gray dreadlocks. I was like, wait a minute, how old are you supposed to be, Ramona? Because you're killing it right now.
Those arms, I saw arms like, wait a minute.
So wait, this is sounding mighty
no.
appreciative.
I'm just saying.
I'd appreciate
appreciative of all of the sisters. I was extremely appreciative of all of the sisters.
Can I say one thing? Because, again, I am humbled to be a part of this Nerdcast. I read comics growing up. Do I have 15,000? How many?
Yes.
15,000 issues at my home. I do not. So it was a little bit, intimidated to be between 3 astute men. But to your point about the level of talent in the film, even as you guys are speaking it's almost like another language with the true characters' names, I still refer to them all in my head. Ooh, Chadwick. Ooh, Lupita. Ooh, Angela. I'm like, that was the talent for me. Forrest. Yeah. Oh, no, Forrest. I mean, Uncle James, you know.
Oh, you made a great point there. I was in conversation, and yes, this is anecdotal, but different age groups, different, I'll say, generations. Forrest Whitaker is going to be a different person or character for us, depending on our generation.
Mm-hmm.
And I had to remind myself, he's a co-star of one of the biggest TV shows right now in Empire. So people already have a level of familiarity with him, or an Angela Bassett, her hit series right now, 911. So,
yeah.
I mean, all these things, I don't want to go to church, but all these things work together for good.
Well,
Come on.
Yeah.
For
Meant
those-
to be.
But even Letitia Wright in her turn in Black Mirror this season, where she had one of the most complex and well-received episodes of the series this year, where she kind of was a proto Shuri, where you think one thing about her during the first 2 acts of the episode, and then by the 3rd act, she completely flips everything, and you're like, oh, snap, look at you.
But all of these actors are relevant right
now.
Right now.
Right, peak
Right
relevance. You have, Michael B. Jordan is just on a tear. I mean, the Jordan Coogler thing is clearly turning into a Hitchcock.
Yeah.
James, who is his guy that he was in?
Right.
Mr. Smith Goes to Washington guy, Vertigo guy, who talks like this. The guy that was in all the Hitchcock movies with.
I know who I just can't call him. Yeah.
So Coogler
so
and Jordan are doing that same sort of thing where they are pairing together in phenomenal movies and producing phenomenal craft. And we are seeing now the emergence. I mean, you look at Denai Guerrera and you can't imagine her not being an important part of the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe now.
Well, now you
can't imagine not
see
seeing
her in the Infinity War trailer,
Right.
running right alongside
And that's
T'Challa,
Not behind.
not behind, with.
right beside, with, as they are charging with Hulk behind them, with Cat
War
behind,
Machine
like
behind
War
them.
Machine behind. It's like, yeah.
But when
we're
you
taking the
think
lead.
about, has there ever been, and I meant to mention this before, but we got caught up. I'm going to push back a little bit on your notion that there's never been a movie where where the action hinges on a black girl. Perhaps not into this level of success, but The Girl with All the Gifts. Have you seen that?
No, I have not.
It's a twisted take on the zombie genre, where instead of all of the zombies just being mindless creatures, there's a group of children who straddle the fence between being lucid and being zombies. And the one girl who controls it and manages it the best is a young black girl. And the entire movie hinges on the examination of, does she hold the secret to curing everybody in the world, or is something else going to happen? And I'm not going to spoil it for you, but go see it now. And then the other one I would say is that in that movie about with Quvenzhané Wallace, where it was not The Wild Things.
The Beasts?
It's not Beasts of the
Beast of the
Western
Southern
of the
Wild.
Southern
Beast of the
Wild.
Southern Wild.
Again, she doesn't have as much dialogue, but clearly she was the focus. And now in the upcoming A Wrinkle in Time, you're getting another young black girl who is literally the center of the universe of the films. But to your point, it's certainly rare.
I can say Akilah and the Bee and so forth. There are
but
movies
at this budget level.
Yes.
I mean,
I can say, as a black woman, never had I seen, and this is
All
where
of
I
that.
stood at it. Well, the particular scene I stood up and cheered was the chase scene after the Korean,
Right.
when she
Where she
was in
kicked
that
off
bad
and
dress
threw
and
that
she
spear.
flipped on top of that audience. And I stood up. I think. I'm
And
sorry, whoever was sitting behind me. That was the best.
Right.
Ever.
Hidden Figures also featured women prominently, but not in being a badass the way
Different.
that this movie
Yeah,
did. And I was
different. Yeah.
that exact
The stakes.
scene
We're talking
where
about
she
stakes.
threw
Yeah.
the spear through the
Through the
window,
window.
stopping the SUV because it was a vibranium spear and unbreakable.
Yeah.
I was like, yes, you are winning every single. And then
Da-
also
on the roof of a car, dodging bullets.
three black women controlling the bulk of the action in that sequence.
Yes.
Shuri
That's
is
Mo's point.
Yes.
That's Mo's like you're here.
Okoye on the car.
Welcome.
And then occasionally coming back to
Welcome, brother.
T'Challa.
Yeah.
Welcome, brother.
Not only that,
T'Challa
not
was
that,
a secondary character at that
Shuri
moment.
telling T'Challa what to do, like, T'Challa, your suit is
Yes.
building up our energy.
It's taking
Do
up all of the
something with
kinetic
it.
The
energy.
sonic boom.
Like,
Yeah,
they stopped T'Challa from making an terrible mistake by
Right.
killing Claw right there. Like,
Yeah.
don't do it.
Yeah.
Again,
like
The
it's
world
just
is watching.
art imitating life or life imitating
Again,
art.
this is something that Angela Bassett had said about the film. This is a film of a king and queens.
Mhm.
The queen, you cannot have a king without a queen. You have the queen mother, you have the royal sister, you have the guards, you have his former love. You have all of these powerful women who do what? Make the king the king.
I'm about to go see it again.
All right, let me ask you this. I want to jump around a couple places before we give our final thoughts or takeaway. And I know we might have another question or two from a viewer, but let me posit this. We have been very Afrocentric in this conversation thus far.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm quite sure there are those who don't know our history or may not even care about our history who are watching this and saying like, well, what's in it for me and I'm not black? Or what's in it for me and I don't care about the many layers of the politics or the ethnography or the sophistication of the discussion.
Come through, ethnography.
In other words, I'm white. Why should I care?
Well, I will say one of the reasons that you can care is that Everett Ross is presented in a much stronger way than he was both in the comic books and in the animated series that was on BET, which I thought was fairly well done, all things considered, and in the first movie in which he was featured, where he was kind of just a tactless kind of functionary. And he starts off that way in this film. But he made a choice that disregarded his own personal safety in order to do the right thing. There was a Wakandan battleship literally shooting vibranium-powered bolts at a piece of glass, and he had maybe 10 seconds to save his own ass, and he said, no, take me back, because he knew if the Wakandan weapons went outside of the country that there would be trouble. And he really came through as a person who outperformed my expectations. He was the one that was the one white character in the movie who actually did something heroic and worthy, and I give him credit for being able to do that.
But what about if I'm white and I don't want to make just a white connection?
It's beyond that. This is a badass movie.
Yeah.
Period. This movie is flawless in its execution. This movie within the Marvel Cinematic Universe, how each film gets better and better and better. It's better written, better casted, better acted, better played out, where they get deeper in trying to really immerse you in a world. You will see this movie. If you have seen any of the Marvel Cinematic movies, you can literally walk out of this movie, as many people I know have, and say, damn it, I think that was the best one yet. I think that was the best one yet. Because if you put it up against the other films, you have to acknowledge the fact that, wow, his suit and his technology, it trumps Iron Man's.
By a lot.
His fighting skill, leadership skill, He's all over Captain America. Thor, he's done something Thor can never do, and that is become king and rule the nation. Ant-Man, your suit, it shrinks. That's cute. That's cute. You've got a shrinky suit. That's cute. We're already talking and communicating with the afterlife, Doctor Strange. We're already there. Outer space, trust and believe our ships can go there, Guardians. In all of the films, there is something in this film where you can say, damn, this film literally has everything in it.
Spoiler alert.
No, we did spoilers.
Okay,
So
spoiler alert.
I mean, like,
go for the
leading
film.
up to, Infinity War.
I was just gonna say, spoiler alert: if you want to go see a Bugatti spaceship,
Right.
go for
Right.
that
Go
reason.
for that reason.
But the social side of me, I do want to say, when T'Challa at the end, if you don't want to get into the specific cultural dialogue, then just get into the humanist dialogue where he says, "Wise men build bridges, a fool builds barriers. We must treat one another as one tribe." This is a collective experience. There is no separation between continents and countries at the end of this movie. Although I will say, for those who stay woke, whether you're Caucasian, Latino, Asian, whatever your background is, if it's not of the Black ancestry, is that you do need to know the terms of colonizer. A lot of kids are going to go to this movie and say, "Mommy, Daddy, what's a colonizer?" And Disney, thank you, because it's factually based, and they're going to have to answer that question. So I think the conversation and the dialogue will make us a better people. So for nothing else, the big blockbuster effects, amazing. But go to make yourself a better person.
So in other words, it's not a black movie. It's just a great movie.
Amen.
Yeah.
Yes.
And right now, the success of this film is proof positive of a couple things. That you can have a film with an all-black cast, super big budget, superhero, spy, intrigue, world, global politic type film that will be supported by all cultures. This is not a film that is on its way to $210+ million in the U.S. that's just being driven by black dollars.
No.
That's not happening.
No,
impossible.
And that's an impossibility. So it's already happening. This is a film that is breaking records in theaters all across. This is a film that, again, the head of Disney's Marvel, cinematic universe has said factually, this is the best movie. If the head and the head honcho of the Marvel Cinematic Universe says this is our crowning jewel, go see it for that reason alone.
And I think it says a lot that he's saying that in a year when Infinity War is coming out.
Yeah.
And we have another viewer question that kind of bridges Black Panther and Infinity War.
Hey Nerdcast, this is Gabriel Smith, and I have a question. So, in Avengers Infinity War, who do you think is going to have the better tech, Shuri or Tony Stark?
Wow. Thank you, Gabriel, for that question. I've got to say, I'm on Team Shuri all the way.
Is there any question, honestly?
I don't think there is, because Tony is at the end of his life cycle in terms of being Iron Man. He's always pushing the envelope, but we know that from a contractual point, we're not going to be seeing Robert Downey Jr. so much. And here you have Shuri, whose name coincidentally sounds a lot like Riri, who is the black character in the comic books who assumes the mantle of Iron Man as Ironheart. And I think it's not too much of a leap. I'm giving you a gift here, Kevin Feige. Shuri in a vibranium Wakandan power suit is Ironheart.
I think this is an easy question, if only because Tony Stark is at the end of his creative career as an engineer and what have you. And you have Shuri, who's a good 35 years his junior in character.
Right.
And
doing exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
I mean, it's one of those things where it can definitely happen. I mean, when you look at the fact that the Marvel Universe now has, or the Marvel Cinematic Universe now has all the Fox properties, which include X-Men, Fantastic Four, and whatnot.
Are you going to bring in Reed Richards in this conversation?
Well, the thing about it is you can bring in the Fantastic Four. You can bring in, to me, the one character that I would love to see in film face off against T'Challa, someone that I think would be his equal, would be Dr. Doom. And that's something where Doom as a character, because they are still doing a Doom film, they never started real production on it. Now that Disney's got it, they can say, thank you for the Doom film, that we can do a Doom solo, and then it could be a Doom versus Panther, and that will be insane.
Well, we know we got some sequels coming, so
without a doubt. Without a doubt.
You don't leave that much money on the table.
Well,
it's still a business.
And thankfully, having Doom in the mix gives you another great villain against which to play Black Panther, because
He needs a villain.
because Claw has been that's been his Joker.
Yeah.
Because in the comics, Claw was the person who killed his father. And so that has been his long-term enemy. And, again, spoiler alert, Claw is no longer with us in the cinematic universe. So you need somebody against him, and you need somebody against whom he can really compete.
Yeah.
And so Reed Richards was the person that kind of introduced the Fantastic Four, introduced the character into the comic book universe. Yes. And for a while, Storm and Black Panther were both members of the Fantastic Four when some stuff was going on, and they were still married. But we're getting to the point now where the adoption and assumption of all of the Fantastic Four characters into the MCU, the assumption and adoption of the X-Men characters as a possibility into the MCU, because we still don't know how that's going to play out. This is the exciting part of what Phase 4 can bring us.
Oh,
I'm
we're talking
excited.
about, as we lead into
Excited.
Avengers Infinity War. Could it be possibly, and we don't know this, I'm just positing this, could it be possibly that we may have a surprise debut of a major character in Avengers Infinity War, which connects back to Black Panther? In the way that Spider-Man showed up.
I think so. I think so. I think with the number of identifiable, and this is something that the Russo brothers have made very, very clear with doing Infinity War, that it's not just the characters we've seen.
Right.
It's all the characters we've seen. But he said they have said time and again, there are characters that the Marvel Cinematic Universe has the licensing rights to, that we are now using this film and the next film as a bridge to bring them in, because we need to move the whole franchise forward. And you cannot do that with the characters that have existed for these 10 years plus. You will have some characters that will carry over, but the new characters that we introduce, you are going to see characters that are going to blow your mind, because you're going to be like, damn, didn't know you guys had them. I.e., everyone forgets Marvel, and they got the rights back to Namor,
right?
Submariner. They got the rights back to him. That's someone that you could be like, wow,
that's
exactly another ruling kingdom. This guy is coming. There's all types of things that they could bring in, but they say you are going to see. So far, they have keep staying with. We have 67 total characters that you will see. That's at least
in Avengers.
That's in Infinity War. That's at
67.
That's
not costumed.
That's at
but
least
67.
Over.
Yeah, it's a lot.
That's at least 20 characters over what we already know of from the collective of all the movies.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So
pretty deep, man.
It's a lot. And with Infinity War being the one, and then Ant-Man and the Wasp, and we know that not Infinity War 2, but it's almost inconceivable to me that you could wrap up everything that the Infinity War is supposed to be in just this one movie, when Thanos isn't even on Earth yet. I just don't see how you get all of that in one film. Because in the comic books...
And do it right.
I mean, in the comic books, not only was it was broken up into pieces. There was a whole separate comic book run just of him getting the gems. And we've introduced the gems across the MCU, or the stones across the MCU right now. So that kind of takes the place of that. And we've introduced some elders of the universe as well, in the Collector and in the Grandmaster. But the whole Thanos controlling the Infinity Stones was its own multi-issue arc. And he doesn't even have all of them yet. Because the first thing he does in the comic books is literally kill half of life in the entire universe with a snap of his fingers. And so we don't have that going on clearly in this movie. So it's hard to imagine, by introducing an entire group of Thanos's minions, which is a whole other evil super friends, and then you've got all of these other characters that you've got to deal with. It's just hard to imagine, because it was originally introduced as Infinity War 1 and Infinity War 2.
Yeah.
Then they sort of abandoned that in terms of how they were marketing it. But it's hard to believe that they're actually abandoning that as a concept. I've got to think that it's going to be Infinity War 2 in some way.
I think that gets us to the point where we've covered what the
just about everything
movie meant to us personally and collectively. We've talked about the cultural impact, the enduring legacy we think it's going to last far longer than just this weekend. You know, the movie has legs. What are some of your takeaways as far as before Black Panther and after Black Panther?
I would just say that this is a game changer in terms of what we can expect. Tawala spoke to how we've never seen a movie with basically a 90% black cast with a budget of this size that is also performing at this level. So I think it's tough to extrapolate that any group of black people in any movie can do what this has done. But certainly as far as the superhero genre and as far as Disney and Marvel Studios is concerned, the concept has been proven. And so I think Blade is probably a foregone conclusion. Figuring out how to reboot Blade is a foregone conclusion. And there are other black characters that are waiting to be explored. And I think as long as Marvel is involved, the floodgates are open as far as what we can expect.
You made a great point.
Yeah,
well,
DC
does that mean that Cyborg gets a movie just because?
I'm going to say no.
I'm going to say no because that stuff's so underperformed.
Well,
his
but
character
it
was
did.
DC and Cyborg was actually better than I thought he was going to be honest. If I'm being completely honest, I thought the actor did a better job, and I thought his character was better than I expected it to be, but DC can't do anything right.
DC has long tried to mimic certain aspects of Marvel and not do it really well. It's not a leap for me to think, oh my gosh, black people like superhero movies. Why don't we do one of our own and give Cyborg its own movie?
No, well, it's on the schedule. It's not like that's
on the schedule, but to be fair, right now DC is definitely doing the same thing on the small screen with Black Lightning, because that is
great point.
100% black cast, and that show is for me, it's incredible.
It's still incredible.
I still really like it. I do.
Really like it.
Did you see the last episode?
Yes. Before we get too far afield.
I don't want to get too far afield. Okay. Thunder has a costume now. She doesn't have a name, but she has a costume now.
Wait, that's what
no es bueno.
That is the only challenge of Black Lightning. It's the costume.
Is it just when she went into the storage facility?
She's not wearing the hoodie anymore.
That's not her costume yet.
I understand. I'm just saying she went to Hot Topic to get a costume.
She went to Hot Topic to get a costume.
And honestly, I'm over it. And also, I gotta say, I like the introduction of Jill Scott, and this is a Wakandan thing, so I'm gonna take it back. Tobias Whale is not getting better for me.
Okay,
he was a lot better when he's fine. He was a lot better to me when he was saying less and looking more menacing. I'm not a fan of his delivery, and he killed Kratos, and so I'm upset with him behind that. T.C. Carson is the voice of Kratos in the God of War movies, and he just killed him last week.
All I'm saying is I dig it, and DC is trying. They're trying to do something on television. Just never been done.
But they may get a bump. I will call it a Black Panther bump.
I will give you. Yeah. I will grant you that it's not doing badly in the ratings at all. But I think probably more people who are hungry to see that kind of play out may goose Black Lightning a little bit. For sure.
Damn. For me, my takeaway is this. I have to give mad props to Stan Lee and Jack Kirby for the desire, the want, and the willingness to create a character that was not stereotypical. Because remember, they were moving away from that stereotypical age of like, we got to do these, exploitation comics and things like that. And when they brought in and created Black Panther, they essentially wanted to create a character from a fictional African nation that was in no way, silly, sidekicky, subservient. This is a character that they wanted to be equal and or better than all the characters in the Marvel universe. And when he first came in, he was introduced by the Fantastic Four, and he came in to observe the Avengers because Wakanda had kept hearing about all these heroes, and he was like, let me go to the States and find out what's going on. And he was, even during his time in the Avengers, he was like, hey, look, I'm just checking y'all out. I'm seeing what you guys are capable of.
I'm not trying to
I'm
stay.
not impressed.
Right.
Yeah, I'm not impressed at all. Props to them for creating this character July of 1966, 3 months before the Black Panthers officially were founded in October of 1966. I'm not saying that that's where they got their name. I'm just saying in the same year, a young brother named Huey P. Newton, who was a fan of comic books, also starred in an organization called the Black Panthers, a film which happened to be released on Huey P. Newton's birthday. So,
just a coincidence.
Just coincidences here. I'm just going to put that out there.
Thank you, Spider-Man Homecoming, for bumping it.
Right. My final thoughts are: love this, love everything about this. Wakanda forever.
I'm going to give you the last word because I really don't need to add to what people have thought about the movie, but I know that you're doing a lot of work in the community, Samantha. How does this movie impact what you do? And I want you to expand or expound upon what you do in the community.
Absolutely. So, one, thank you again. The nerdtastic side of me is the media side. The definition of media is a mass tool of communication. And whether it is entertainment, as this movie is just an amazing, great movie, but the edutainment factor of Black Panther long lives beyond, and we see it. In 1976, there was a coin that was termed called symbolic annihilation, and that's when you are erased from representation and you don't see yourself. So when you look at the children and the kids, and even what Ryan Coogler did with this movie, I know we didn't touch too much on the imagery and the role that the children who were in the film played, and the children who are viewing, and the youth that are viewing this film take away, but I do want to say that cannot go without being acknowledged. There were 4 different scenes throughout Black Panther where he intentionally zoomed in on the children. And I hope you stayed after for the final Easter eggs, because even that last one, you see those 3 children. You see the 3 boys on the parking lot. It ends in the community center in Oakland. And I go back to art imitating life, or life imitating art. When you leave that theater and you see the artists like Kendrick Lamar, you see the athletes like Serena Williams, you see all these people buying out movie theaters for screenings to bring kids to this, it is because they know that when you see it, you can't achieve it. And so for me, Wakanda Forever, it's the authentic dashiki meeting the Black Beret. And it's movie theaters where people all across the Pan-African diaspora, that includes this United States, are celebrating this movie in a moment of solidarity, unity, and beauty. And it is amazing. In terms of what I do, Mo, I am now spearheading a nonprofit called the Healthy Housing Foundation. It is beginning here in Los Angeles, California, and South Florida. In some of our most economically disenfranchised communities, there's a problem of over 60,000 homeless people in Los Angeles alone. You alluded to the slums in Nairobi, Deep Sloop. And what we're currently seeing in the United States is now beginning to rival that of third world nations here, where we have, the greatest developed country on this earth. So what we are doing is looking to end homelessness. We are looking to house 10,000 people in 5 years. We are cutting through the red tape. If you know of somebody in danger of losing, becoming homeless, or you yourself are homeless, hearing this somewhere, definitely go to ahf.org. We do have immediate resources where we are housing people. And Mo, if I have time, can I just read one thing?
Absolutely.
For me personally, Black Panther, again, going to just the back and forth between Black Americans and just the larger Black population of the world, specifically those on the continent of Africa. I wrote this while I was on my first trip to the motherland, about just the dichotomy of being Black, termed African American. And this is what Wakanda Forever means for me and my personal takeaway. I am Harriet, sojourner searching for truth in roots deep in my soul that tap out John and Coltrane's and Billy's jazzy blues until I rock harder than ever could, or rhyme harder than Eminem and Iggy ever would, because I am Black, and this is all me, a global culture dominating charts, courts, cases, and even countries as our bold and beautiful first family reigns supreme, yet always benevolent, like our leaders Martin, Malcolm, Marcus, Michelle. From civil rights to Garza's Black Lives Matter, I am Black, unapologetically, lovingly Black as the night, and I have two mothers, the one who gave me and the one who raised me. They call her Africa and Lady Liberty, and this is me. And I'm the image of my mother. We are Wakanda.
I'm sorry you have to come behind that, Thomas Cunningham. But what was your takeaway, maybe as in a personal sense or maybe in a community sense?
I just think that we as people who observe media and comment on it were given the gift of a piece of art that does more than it was financially called to do. This was a movie financed by a major United States corporation. What they wanted was money. They invested a lot of money, hoping that they would earn a lot of money. And it was not a bad bet, because this is a multi-billion-dollar franchise, arguably the most successful franchise in this small a period of time in cinematic history. The Bond franchise is older, but it's decades and decades of movies. This is 10 years of movies, 18 movies, and it is a huge, phenomenal success. But what Coogler and his amazing crew of talented actors, creative people, musicians, people who did the score, the costuming people, the people who built the world of Wakanda. And we didn't get to say it, but this was an epic world that was built. And we spent almost the entire movie in a place that does not exist, except in the mind of these creative people. We also got, in addition to a phenomenal piece of art, something that is pushing the boundaries of so many different socially important conversations that it is nigh impossible to reconcile how fortunate we are that we were able to do something in something that is going to make as much money and is as meaningful as this is for our people in this country. And our people are represented in all of the American people. And so to hear your poem, it really kind of pulls it together to me that the reason that non-Black people should see and appreciate this is because your friends and brothers in this country that you have not recognized as fully human are letting you know that we are here and we are excellent. And it advantages you to know that and be aware of that truth. Because if you are living in the blindness of thinking that we are not your equals, and in some instances your superiors, you're setting yourself up for a failure that you do not want to meet. So that's what this movie means to me. Wakanda forever.
Wakanda forever.
Wakanda forever.
I'm Mo Kelly for Thomas Cunningham, Samantha Grandberry, and also Twala Sharp, executive producer of The Mo Kelly Show. This is Nerdcast.
Nerdcast!
About this.
Nerds.
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 What is a nerd?